Good. Thank you, Chair. The next witness we will hear from today is Sissy Austin.
Thank you, Ms Fitzgerald. Welcome, Sissy. We're pleased to have you here to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Now, I should say we're going to start the session in an open session, but at some point I will draw on the standing order that I understand was made yesterday to close the session. And I will be relying on solicitor assisting to let me know if we're straying into any of that territory, because it is there is some sensitive material that will be referred to, and it might be hard to dodge in and out. And the microphone may need to be moved a little.
Thank you.
Now, before I swear you in, I would just like to acknowledge that the witness today has had a recent injury, and we're incredibly grateful that she was still wanting to come and give evidence today, but we may need to take a few more breaks. And Ms Austin, if you would make sure you let me know.
Yeah,
getting tired, and I might notice.
And
we've got
thank you.
The lunch break after this, so there's no one waiting outside.
Yeah, all good. Thank you. Thanks.
Now, I should also say, that issue is of no relevance for today's purposes, so I won't be asking you any questions about it.
Yes, thank you.
Now, I'll ask you to take truthful evidence to the Yoorrook Commission today. Do you agree to do that?
Yeah.
Now, you've provided an outline of evidence and a significant amount of material, which I will tender at the end of your evidence. It's very detailed, your outline of evidence, so if at any time you tire and you've had enough, you can rest assured that all of that evidence will be considered by the commissioners, so don't push on.
Yeah.
It's very, very detailed.
Yes, thank you.
Of course, hearing you provide the evidence today will be really beneficial for the Commission, and I will plan to build in some rest periods if you're flagging. Ms Austin, would you introduce yourself to the Commissioners? Tell us where you're from and who your mob are.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name's Sissy Austin, and I'm very proud Gunditjmara Kirai Warong Djapurrung woman, and I currently live in Ballarat on Wadawurrung country. And
can you introduce your family? Tell us about your direct family, whether you've got any brothers and sisters.
Yeah, so I have an incredible family, and yeah, I'm the middle sibling. I have an older sister and a younger brother, and obviously very proud of my dad and his story, which I've shared in my evidence. My incredible father, Neville Austin, and yeah, I just absolutely acknowledge him, and that, yeah, his strength is my strength today.
And your father was a member of the Stolen Generations, who actually was the first member of that group of people to receive a letter of apology. Do you want to tell us a bit about that process?
Yeah, so when I was putting this evidence together with the team, I really wanted to ensure that I was telling my father's story from my perspective and not speak on behalf of my father, but I wanted to talk about how it was growing up, knowing Dad's story and learning of Dad's story, different chapters of Dad's life as we became older. I guess we've learnt more and more as we've become more mature and older as well. And my father is a member of the stolen generation, and we grew up knowing that in a way, but also like in a way that our dad was so strong, like, and that was how we saw it, and we were so proud of Dad. And I think we had this old video. Sorry, I know this isn't part of my evidence, but we had an old videotape of Dad. Dad and Arnie Lynn Austin, they organised a Sorry Day protest. I think it was like in the year 2000. They recently found the videotape 2 years ago, and it's footage of a rally that they organised as victim survivors of the stolen generation. As kids, we played that video that captured the rally of Dad talking, and we just thought Dad was just incredible, seeing him up there telling his story, and also like telling our grandmother's story, like as well, and like always acknowledging her pain, like of Dad being removed from her. And yeah, so like, I won't talk about like the details of Dad's removal, but I acknowledge it deeply. And I guess when putting this together, it plays an important part of the beginning, because, you know, on reflection, when Dad received that and fought really hard for that letter of apology from the Victorian state government, we were so proud. And I like look back and think that at that time it almost felt like it was the end of the stolen generation, like that, and that there was hope, and like I guess and I just acknowledge that feeling, and that I was in year 11 and on the school bus, and we still went to school that day, and it was on the radio in the school bus, and it said like, never lost, and like the stolen generation receives first letter of apology from the state government. And it was emotional. It was incredible that, you know, Dad fought for that, and he did that for his for Mum, for our Nana Eileen Austin, and I acknowledge that fight, and I wish that that point was, you know, the end of the stolen generation.
And we'll hear from you today how that you don't think that was the end.
Yeah.
If I can perhaps just jump the gun a little bit while we're talking about your dad. Throughout the process that you're about to tell us about, with your involvement with kids who are in child protection, it was particularly hard for your dad as well, wasn't it? Because of his own experiences. Can you speak a bit about the impact of what happened to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, as we've experienced the child protection system, Dad would say to us, like, it breaks Daddy's heart, and like, for his kids to even, to come head on with the same system that removed him, and there would be points where it was just like too hard for Dad, I guess, like to support us in a whole way, because it's been quite traumatizing for Dad to see in real time, kind of like all over again. Yeah.
Now, I should mention, Commissioners, that we will jump around a little bit, because I'm planning on doing as much as we can in open session, and then there'll be some matters we do in closed session. And I should say to the witness that if we get to a point where you'd like to speak about some things in closed session, you can make a note that you'd like to return to it in the closed session.
Yep.
On that, I will now move to another topic, what we can talk to in open session, which is about your experience in becoming a carer for Tinjani. And the reason why we can speak about that is that Tinjani is now an adult, and she's happy for you to talk about your journey with her. So if you could talk about becoming a carer.
Yeah.
And in particular, starting with how old you were at the time.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear it as becoming a carer, because it was never like that. It was kind of just like looking after family, but I was 21 at the time, where Tinjani needed me and needed a carer in that chapter of her journey, and she was around 13 years old. I'm not sure how much detail to
my understanding is that because Tinjani is now an adult and she's happy for you to tell the story, that you can speak freely about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Tinjani and I grew up together. Tinjani's nana, an amazing, incredible, respected elder in our community who raised Tinjani until she passed away, Auntie Millie Austin, and it was at that point where I stepped in and cared for Tinjani when Auntie Millie passed away. But prior to me becoming Tinjani's carer, there's lots of really beautiful memories that we have growing up together and with Auntie Millie there, and it's helpful that Tinjani turned 21 last year, so I did put a bit of effort putting together a 14-minute 21st speech of our memories together, which I really loved doing. But so there was that chapter, and then it was kind of like transitioning into we were cousins, and then I became this carer for Tinjani, and it was both beautiful but challenging because there was these two contradicting ways of caring for our young ones. And I think having the pressure at times from the child protection system to be a quote definition of a kinship carer versus me just naturally caring for her as her older cousin. And it wasn't until a few years into caring for Tinjani that I even knew of the term kinship carer, and so it was helpful, I guess, to have something to label it as in certain situations. But I'm happy for you to ask about specifics around that. But she's an incredible young woman, and it obviously came with challenges that we both faced.
So at the start, you're 21 years old. What supports do the department put in place in terms of cash, advice, how to do it, enrolling her in school, all those things? What support were you given at the time?
There was no support. Tinjani had left an unsafe placement that the department had placed her in, and actually called up my sister and I at Southern Cross Station, and that was how she ended up with us. It was her seeking her family. And I do talk about how it was interesting that there was both a real casual approach from child protection with regards to Tinjani at this time, and it was almost she was deciding where she wanted to be, but there was also, it was just like there was this non-existent protection and guidance from both, you know, VACA and child protection of this child at the time. And I thank Bunjil that she landed with us and with me, who protected her, and we were a safe option for her to come to. But yeah, there was no support at all. It wasn't until 2 years that I even learnt that there was kinship carer payments 2 years into the placement. We'd obviously experienced really significant challenges in those first 2 years in, you know, housing. When putting this evidence together, I counted that over the 5 years that Jani and I, you know, that we lived in over 10 houses. I sat and counted the addresses, and so there was no stability with housing. Like, getting Tinjani into school was almost impossible, you know, because of there being this initial no care approach from the department. It made it hard to enrol her into school without there being any formal carer while she was a child. Yeah.
Because you couldn't say you were her parent or there was a specific role.
Yeah.
The school let her in initially, but then when they realised...
That the enrolment forms, that I wasn't an official guardian. Yeah.
And made her leave.
Yeah, so she was 2 weeks into school and then, she had to leave. And that's shame, you know. And then we just, I was 21, and I've only realised I was 21 when putting this together, but I envisioned enrolment as a smooth process, and that's a privilege that someone, I didn't grow up in care, and anyone who does an enrolment process smoothly, that's a privilege, because getting a child who's in care enrolled into school is hard work. And she had to leave. We tried for weeks and weeks to get a letter from the department to say that she was in my care, and we couldn't get a letter. We were going round and round in circles. And I remember one day we were sitting at the co-op with some community members trying to work it out, and it was actually ended up being a suggestion from the family violence unit at a police station to contact a lawyer, and that was how we ended up getting her into school, was to organise for her to enrol as an independent child. Yeah.
Thanks. I also wanted to touch upon with Tinjani the cultural plan that was produced for her, and I think it was produced. Do you remember if that was produced by VACA or who that was produced by?
It was produced by partnership with, it was BADAC and the department. And
your evidence is that it was a gammon case plan. And
it
why
was
do
a
you
gammon
say
case
that?
Because it was incorrect. It didn't reflect Tinjani and the incredible, culturally strong young woman that she was at that time. And I know I provided a copy of it to Yoorrook, but we actually just received it in the mail, and the top of it says mob or country, and they wrote on it, currently unknown. And I remember when we saw that and we were both what? like mine, like I had been, like everyone knows that the Austins are Gunditj Mara #1, but like not like she'd been with me for a couple of years now. Prior to that, she'd had workers from VACA, from the department. There'd been years of, and it would have just been asking us, like just ask the child, like ask her, and she would have proudly said that she was a Gunditj Mara woman. So yeah, that was like a bit, it's a kick in the guts, you know, currently unknown.
That's attachment 1. Tinjani's mob is yet to be determined.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And traditional country is currently not known.
yeah.
And in your view, was that true at the time?
No way, and that's so untrue. And that is like you reflect back to like how Auntie Millie raised Tinjani in those years, you know, prior to her passing away. Like she knew then who she was. They just needed to ask her, you know, talk to her, meet her.
There are some parts of the evidence about Tinjani that we'll do in closed session, but I thought it would be great to talk about you established a Facebook group out of a need you saw to help people connect with their siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to just talk in the open session about just the general problems you've seen with siblings who are in different placements being connected, problems you had connecting them just at a general level, and what the Facebook group does and how you've seen it work well?
Yes. Yeah, I think, I don't know.
I'm
generally,
really testing your ability to tightrope walk there.
yeah, I'll get there. It's kind of
We can do it all in closed session if that's easier.
like I can talk in general that there are young Koori kids in our community who are placed in separate placements, who have been separated, and yeah, I've been a part of a group where we've filled the gap of where the services don't keep our kids connected, where we've seen that gap, and rather than waste time, you know, complaining about it all, you know, we just took it upon, ourselves to find where, I don't know, kids were, siblings were, and connected with carers, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous. Some kids were placed with non-Indigenous carers, others with Indigenous carers, and we created this casual type group of bringing all the carers together of a sibling group, where we would, you know, share things, and I probably will stop.
At that general level, why do you think it's important for siblings who are placed in different placements to continue to have contact with each other?
Keeping connected to family is our right as Aboriginal people, and our children have a right to know, you know, who their siblings are, who their family is, where they belong. Our kinship is who we are. Like, without knowing who we are, where we belong, there's a sense of, you know, unknown, a sense of like loss. Like I've witnessed there being, you know, grief of someone who hasn't passed away, but you know they're there, but where are they? And I've heard those stories that, like, from our elders, but what we don't realise is this is happening right now. There's children, Koori kids in our communities who know they've got a sibling somewhere. They just don't know where they are because they don't have a voice. And that's what I've witnessed and experienced, and I just, absolutely acknowledge that, particularly when our Koori kids growing up in care are becoming older and trying to work out where they belong.
And what's your view of how much work the department does to make sure that siblings retain contact with each other?
Yeah, look, I can only speak from my experience and what I've witnessed, and I think that it depends on the worker of the day. And I do acknowledge that maybe you might be lucky to one day get a deadly worker who might put together a plan, but then they leave and then the plan gets lost and the new worker asks the carers, like, do you have a copy of that plan? There's no consistency in it, like 100% say that. In my experience, I've seen it not happening at all and it not being a priority, and you almost feel like they kind of make you feel like you're hassling for something that isn't important, or that, they're busy, everyone's busy, too busy to keep Koori kids connected to their siblings. And then there's that first initial, creating those connections, but then it's about maintaining them. And that's where the challenges lie as well, where there's siblings that are placed all over the state in multiple different placements who, go to different schools, have different, sporting commitments, all those types of logistics that aren't thought about because, the privileged ones working in the space wouldn't even take a moment to put themselves in our kids' shoes. And so I have only, learned this from experience, and an incredible carer that has been my rock throughout my 9 years in caring for kids is we've gotten through together over years, but also just it's not happening consistently, and I just again thank Bunjil that the kids that I've and my rock have cared for. We've had the energy to try and fight these systems to make things keeping kids connected, keeping that connection maintained over the years, and not just surface level, stuff.
I might take you, you've mentioned a person who's been incredibly supportive to you, but also has been a rock, you described her as.
Yeah.
In your witness statement, you give evidence, and it's really about the journey of 3 women, you, your sister, and Jodie.
Yeah.
Just before we go into closed session, I thought it would be good to do as much of this as we can in open session.
Yeah.
Do you want to the extent you can without talking about individual kids, talk about the journey that the 3 of you went on? There's a particular sibling group that you were very three of you fought really hard to keep together and connected. And so if you can just talk about sort of how that came to be, how the three of you worked to support each other with that sibling group in a general way, and sort of what happened with child protection along that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like how it came to be, I don't know, I was feeling really nervous coming in here today, and just as we drove in, me and my best friend put on in the car Uncle Archie's song, Let Love Rule, and over the last like year or so, that song's really made sense to me, in that like everything that we do is for love, and like although there's days where you feel like so frustrated at the system and services that aren't doing what they say that they're supposed to be doing, like trying to always bring it back to the love of the kids. And I think like when I reflect on the journey that us three women have been on in being involved in the child protection system as carers and, as family members advocating tirelessly for our kids, like we've just, it's, I think like the key to it is that like I can't imagine doing it alone, and I absolutely take my hat off to kinship carers out there who are advocating alone. And I think like having Jodie, I wish that we could somehow track the amount of minutes that we've spent in meetings with the department, advocating for kids, but it doesn't like, it's not like warm and fuzzy, and it's not like pretty. It's actually like, it's exhausting, and it's like tears once the meeting's finished, and it's like, how are we going to keep on going? And it's like, sis, you have a break, I've got this meeting, like, and it's about like, we've kind of always said that when one of us falls down or needs a break, the other one of us steps up, and that's kind of how we've balanced caring for a sibling group is, just carrying each other through, and culturally as well, like having like a deadly staunch black woman, and as well as my sister, like having us together was just solid. And I love that we've been able to do what we've done, even though it's had its like other side of the coin where it's been so hard. And I love that we've been able to create such beautiful memories and connections for kids in our community. And I know that we've 100% done that. And like, and I think like I reflect back on like Uncle Archie's song, that we've done that for the love of the kids, and like, but we shouldn't have to do that though, because there are services that are paid millions of dollars to do what we do in our spare time, being carers, working full time, being community members. We've picked up the weight, and we've picked up the work that there's people that are paid to do, but we've decided to, rather than, although obviously you've seen in the evidence, there's lots of complaints. We were good at that, and we were good at emails, and I'll give us that too. But I've lost my train of thought, but it needs to be acknowledged that we're doing work that we shouldn't have to do. Yeah.
The other aspect of your evidence that really comes through is the amount of time you've also spent supporting someone who's having their kids removed in the context of experiencing family violence. And to the extent that we can discuss that without identifying anyone, can you speak to the particular difficulties that women face when they're having to engage with the child protection or having child protection in their lives at that acute time when they're experiencing family violence?
Yes.
Really, I'm interested in the extent to which you felt there's any recognition by the department that perhaps they could look at the family, if the concern by the department is the family violence issue, whether there's any work done by the department to address the family violence issue, or whether they just look at the result and, whether those underlying issues are being considered by the department.
Yeah, look, I guess I can talk to the context of, you know, being a community member and having, you know, witnessed Aboriginal women in our community experiencing family violence and where there's kids involved. And I don't know, it's hard for me to do justice to this story without telling it properly.
So maybe we'll do that in closed session.
Yeah, but I guess like the main things are that, like, child protection and their minion services that act as though they're independent from this vicious cycle that's treating Aboriginal women like they're nothing, particularly our mothers. And I've been in situations where I'm constantly reminding the department that this is a Aboriginal mum that you are talking about. Like, this isn't, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that child protection, what I've seen is them strip Aboriginal women of their, I guess, their motherhood in a way. And it's like, and I know that we've heard from other hearings that where there's fear to report family violence and domestic violence, where there's children involved, and the fear and the reality of your kids being removed is very real. We've all seen it. And it's, I guess, like, the dehumanisation of Aboriginal mums is quite frankly disgusting, and the language needs to change. The way that our mums are treated, the conditions that are placed on Aboriginal mums from the courts are unrealistic. I'd love to see one of those, you know, non-Indigenous, like, white women who you see walking around the city rushing from tram to tram. I'd love to see them rushing and having to, like, you know, rushing to, like, to a service to do the one of 3 urine tests that you've had to do in that day, but also, like, you're expected to be at child protection at this time to visit, or else that's a big red flag with the upcoming court date. I'd love to see them attending court, the most culturally unsafe, dehumanising place to enter into. You know, you feel like the villain of the story, and yet you're the victim of family violence here.
Or the hero of the story.
Yeah, no, and I just think that and that's also like trying to, you know, paint the strength of our women who do fight these systems. And there are some who understandably give up because it is so hard. But like the hoops that our mums are made to go through in order to even get an unsupervised visit with their child is significant, and but it's not a battle that our women aren't facing daily and waking up and being like, okay, I've got to do this because I've got to try and get my kid back, you know. And obviously I'm in a closed session. It's a very personal story and it's a beautiful story, and it's one of many that I would love for Yoorrook to hear, particularly from women who have lived it and fought it. And like hear from the women themselves, not the services. Hear from the women who are experiencing it cold, hard face, because that's where the solutions and where the pain and the hurt is, and that's where our women deserve to have those stories told in order to heal and maybe close that chapter in order to move on. Yeah.
Before we go into closed session, I thought we would just go to the recommendations for reform. You've lived through this system and you have a lot of clarity about what needs to change. And I will just, each of them has a heading, and I thought I'd just ask you, we will just go through them in turn. They start on page 16 of your witness statement. And the first of them relates to, you think reform needs to happen around contact arrangements between siblings in out-of-home care. What do you think needs to happen in that space?
Yeah, like what I've talked about around there being contact plans, but plans that reflect that sibling group. Like there can't just be like not one thing fits all, whatever that saying is. And my recommendation is like for there to be accountability and accountability, to that contact plan. And I'd love for where there are elders to that sibling group, they be who you're accountable to.
You also make recommendations in relation to funding for kinship carers.
Yeah, like I've, tried for years to get funding off the department and VACA and to help with just travel costs with keeping, kids who are separated across the state. That seems like so minor, but it's really important to highlight that it isn't happening. And it's like you almost feel like someone who's begging for change when you're like, can you help us fund keeping these kids connected?
You also make some observations and recommendations about the attitude of the department towards Aboriginal mothers.
Yeah, I think I've just talked a little bit about that. But
the view of them as mothers, not as drug addicts or, that they are a mum.
Yeah, and I've made pretty clear there that every single child I've cared for has loved and expressed their love for their mother deeply. And it's interesting how, as a carer and many other carers that I've connected with over the years, the department try and get you on side with them and create like this us and them, with like us being the carer and the department versus the mum and like really trying to like, create this us and them. And we all talk about it, and it's hard to put words to the experience of it, but there's no us and them. Like we want our kids back with their mums, and just continuously reminding in these meetings, like this child has a mother, like this child has a mother.
The other aspect you make recommendation about is the lack of guidance and education for non-Indigenous carers. In your witness statement, there are some stories in there about some non-Indigenous carers that you found to be really great, who were really making efforts to keep cultural connection, and then some that you found to be openly racist. Now, obviously, but these recommendations are about the lack of guidance and education that are provided for non-Indigenous carers.
Yeah, and I have some positive relationships with some non-Indigenous carers of kids that I know, and like who are incredible people, like desperately seeking like information and, you know, stuff on the child that they're caring for. And there needs to be more out there, because it shouldn't be up to like people like me to be there's only so much one person can do, and there's services out there that should be, you know, educating non-Indigenous carers. And also, like, the way that it happens backwards as well is, like, questionable. Like, I'm also in this carers group in Melbourne where so many white carers in the group get Aboriginal kids, and they'll post in it and be like, what can I do with my Aboriginal child that I've got in my care today? And heaps of them will comment and be like, take them to Bunjalaka, like, take them to the museum, like, and then I'm just like, you know, it happens backwards where, like, people who are, like, good people get an Aboriginal child, and the fact that they're even having an Aboriginal child placed with them in the first place, and they're taking them to Bunjalaka to connect them with their culture, like, as a first reference. That shouldn't be happening. And it's like 2023, you know, like, and it's a disservice to that young child that's been placed with well-meaning carers who have absolutely no idea about our culture. Yeah.
The last recommendation relates to the issue of lateral violence, relying on lateral violence as a reason for refusing services. What's your experience with that, and what are your recommendations?
What number was that? Sorry.
That is still at the very bottom of page 16. Yeah, 221.
Okay. So this is the open session. Yeah. So I think that when using the term lateral violence, you need to use it if you truly know what it is. And there's some really incredible people in our communities across the country who are very knowledgeable on what lateral violence is and how to identify it. That's number one. And I guess from my experience is that I'm obviously I'm a vocal community member, and I do it for the love of our children. And it's hard, and I'm very grateful that there is Yoorrook now for accountability, but it's almost like you're hitting your head against the wall trying to, I don't know what my thought process is here, but back to lateral violence.
You've made complaints about things. Yeah,
complaints, yes, about a service refusing to buy a 3-year-old a bed. And I made that complaint to the Ombudsman, and that service was an ACO, like one of our own service, like, you know, an Aboriginal community controlled organisation that can't buy a 3-year-old Aboriginal child a bed. And lateral violence through that ombudsman complaint, it hit a dead end because the CEO of that service provided whatever to the ombudsman that my service was denied by that ACO because of a status that I'd posted on Facebook about that child not getting that service, not buying the 3-year-old a bed.
You
And so their reasoning for not providing the bed was because of lateral violence based on that status. And then the ombudsman, who are white, then said to me that it's not their place to be deciding what is and isn't lateral violence, so they're going to close my complaint from there and there's nothing further they can do. And I guess so, like, my thing from here was that lateral violence is 100% a thing. I'm not denying that.
But you need to be able to make a
it's
complaint.
being thrown around in a way that is silencing our people. It makes us look like it makes you feel like not good as well to be accused of lateral violence. And I think that it should be like an accusation of lateral violence is serious. And I don't think that people see it as seriously as like accusing someone of, you know, a violent crime, you know, but it's serious because it silences you. And where am I as an Aboriginal woman to go from there, where understandably the ombudsman, that they were being, you know, culturally sensitive. They were like, we can't decide this. So I just think that our community in, like, you know, self-determination, we need to have yarns with the ones who have done lots of research into lateral violence and decide on our terms of reference based on lateral violence and how is it committed, and like how do we work through someone who has experienced lateral violence or someone who is perpetuating, is that the word, lateral violence on another community member. Because I also don't have anger towards those that perpetuate it, because I think it's 100% a symptom of colonisation and the genocide that we're currently experiencing and the hurt and pain that exists beneath the surface of our existence in this like state and this colony. But yeah, I think like where there's like clear definitions and stuff based on our community here, maybe like in Victoria, like we can be like, no, actually it wasn't lateral violence. Or if we had like a committee of elders that decided whether or not it was lateral violence based on, you know, the research on that. It's very bad in our communities, being like, it's thrown around everywhere, and it's not good. Yep.
Now, I think we might be ready to move into closed session, and if the commissioners are content, we might just have a brief lull, perhaps not a break, but just a moment while the link is taken down. We would seek to close the court in reliance on the standing orders that were made yesterday.
Thank you.